G'day guys, welcome back to the Dora project. Today's video is really exciting because we're actually going to introduce some modifications and some new bits and pieces to the boat. I don't know if you can see what's behind me, but the sounder that I'm running currently is a Lowrance Hook 4X GPS, and it's been doing the job for a while now, but it's time to introduce some big boys toys. This is Lowrance's 9-inch Elite Ti2, and I'm not introducing just one, I'm introducing two to Dora. We're going to have one on the console and one on the bow, and these two things, well, this sounder is awesome because these two sounders will wirelessly talk to each other, so it makes the installation really easy for a numpty like me, and we're going to take you through what we do there. Stick around and let's do it. This is not an unboxing channel by any means, but I know that there are a lot of people out there who are looking for their next sounder. So I'll just run you through what comes in the box, and then we'll get straight into the install. So opening it up, first thing you're going to see is your Lowrance, or your sounder. It's beautifully protected with some plastic. The back, your Lowrance brand is protected as well, and then when you take off the cover you get the first glimpse of what your 9-inch touchscreen is going to look like. I'm really excited. I've never owned a touchscreen before. It'll be really interesting. So moving right along, you will also get a transducer with a beautifully long cable. That's going to be plenty long enough for this 4-meter boat. So we'll put that to the side. We have our power cable. We have a bag here that has our locking turn knobs for the bracketry. But also what we've got in here is a blade fuse holder for our power cable. So those things go together. We have some stainless steel hardware and some zip ties. It's even really nice that the hardware comes with some Loctite, because some people are pretty rough on their gear and you need to know it's secure. The first sign of your bracket, and for me it's really nice to see that the bracket is actually, I think it's an aluminium bracket. It even feels lighter than that. Maybe it's a magnesium alloy. But you got some great knurled plastic components on the inside which will lock your sounder from rotating. We have our steel bracketry for the transducer, so this will obviously mount to the top of this like so. Really nice. And then lastly, what we have in the box is some literature. So you've got a quick guide in a few different languages. You have a card for contact information if you need some help. And you have the user manual, or the installation manual here. Because I've had two, I've been able to open one up and have a squiz and read through the whole thing to find out what we're doing. I would suggest that you guys read it too. This video shouldn't be a substitute entirely for these manuals, but hopefully it gets you moving along. So let's get on to removing our old sounder. One of the most important things when you are dealing with electronics on your boat is when you are fiddling with that stuff, as in installing a new sounder, electric motor, anything, you're fiddling with the electronics, it's really important to disengage and stop any current from running through the electronics. So I'm back here and I'm going to remove all of my cables from the battery. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, look, you only need to take off the positives and you're fine. And technically you're probably correct, but in my head, I'd just rather not play with fire or electricity, and I'm just gonna remove everything. And it really doesn't take me any extra time. And we're done. So just fix your hardware loosely back to the terminals, just so you don't lose it, because you don't want to lose this stuff. and we're on to the next step. So meet you at the console. So we are at the console right now because we have an old sounder here. Some of you guys are probably doing a virgin install of a sounder onto your boat, but I need to get rid of this. In similar words as the mighty car mods, guys, it's really interesting when you actually start to remove this stuff. So the vessel archaeology of this, when you remove the bracket, you can see so many misdrilled holes, and it's really disappointing. This large hole that was used to run the cables through looks like it's been chewed by, I don't know, a gumming toddler. Like it's just a really bad job. But again, this project, we're gonna find these things and we're gonna fix them. So the next step after removing everything is actually removing all of the old wiring. The power cable for the Elite Ti2s is entirely different to what the Hook 4 is running. Gonna remove this, remove the old transducer, and start wiring up the Elite Ti2s. So I'm armed with my scissors, and now we're just gonna cut the cable ties and pull this stuff out. But what I've noticed is there is a splash guard at the rear here where the transducer cable comes up through the transom and then obviously runs up and through to the sounder, but that's been riveted in there, which is a pain in the ass because now I have to remove those rivets. But with the close-up, you'll see how bad of a job these guys have done. It's really disappointing. Again, this vessel archaeology, it's I don't think it ever comes up with good things, but that's what happens when you buy a second-hand boat. So guys, one of the first things you need to consider when you're installing a sounder onto your boat, after you've chosen your sounder, is where it's going to be placed. So again, like I was saying before, I wanted one on the console as well as one on the bow. Now for me, the decision is a little easier because I've already got some pretty gnarly holes drilled in the top of my console here. So I kind of don't want to see them, and I'm going to try and cover them up. But at the same time, this bracket is really quite wide because what you can see is the size difference of these two units. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to use the same hole. So using your bracket, have a look where you're going to be able to mount it. And I'm almost 2 inches or 50 mil away from where the original sounder was. And what I won't be able to cover in this part, but in the second part, is the actual fixture of this stuff down there. I really want to use some ram mounts for this because they are fantastic to swivel and move the sounders around, but also it makes it easier to remove them from the boat. So with that in mind, I should be able to use the existing enormous hole that's in the console, where I'll be able to elevate the sounder in the same position and have it right in front of me. The other part, and the other reason why I want to use this and move further to the left, is the top of the console is quite valuable with real estate for where you can put things. So I've obviously got my wash tub, and I like to put my phone there. So I don't want to totally take up this space with the sounder. So I'm going to use the ram mount, fit it here. I'm going to have it elevated with the bracket, and it's going to look great here. It's also going to be more centered into the boat. So if you're further to the left, or the stern, no, what am I going to say? The port side of the boat. Oh God, this is a boating channel. On the port side of the boat, you're going to see it just as well as the starboard side. So I'm going to still use this hole, but I might have to make it bigger to accommodate the diameter of these terminals. One of the other most important things about doing any wiring on your boat is the chronology or the sequence that you wire things. For example, this unit has two different cables that'll run to it. Obviously the power, but also the transducer or the information. For the power cable, like we were just showing before, the diameter of the terminal is rather large, but the opposite end of that cable is really quite narrow, and that's really easy to slip through some smaller holes, especially this one here, and straight into the switch panel. But where it becomes tricky is the transducer cable. So the transducer is obviously very large. Again, this is probably 2 inches wide. And the opposite end is similar in size to the terminal for the power. Now, there isn't a thin end to these cables, so we have to consider the way that it goes in. I'm not going to chop this because there are so many cables in that, and I also don't need to if I do this intelligently. But what I do know is this is the largest common denominator in terms of the hole size that everything needs to be fed through. So I know that this needs to go through the transom at the back there, but this also needs to go through the hole in the console. I'm going to measure this up, and I'm going to drill the hole just oversized so this can be fed through really easily. What would probably be best to do this job is a Christmas tree drill or a step drill. And I'm pretty sure I've got one of those laying around, and we're just going to open up these holes. In a best case scenario, this hole wouldn't be there and you'd have to drill it yourself. And that would have been much nicer, but we get what we're given. This right here is our step drill. It goes from 4mm all the way up to 32mm. Whilst we don't need that, or the 32mm, we're going to need somewhere in between. And this is really good, so you don't have to keep changing your drill bits. This is a terrible drill to be using, but it's what I've got, so bear with me. I've made sure that I moved my hydraulic cable. I don't want to drill into that. That'd be terrifying if I did. And yeah, just make sure that everything else from the other side is clear. So let's go. Now, I think we're there. And we're through. Safety first too, guys. Make sure you wear your goggles. Because with aluminium, you can't use a magnet to get any chips out, and you really don't want that pain in your ass or your eye. Either one. Oh, so easy. Just change your power drill a couple of times. But in all seriousness, now that you've done that, it's really a good time to actually clean up and vacuum all of this stuff. All right, so now that we've got our, I think it's 25mm holes drilled in the console and the transom, it's time to feed through the transducer cables. Some of you might like to actually mount the brackets first, but I might do it, feed the cables first, and then so I can leave it all sort of protected whilst I do this from the back there. So let's go jump out of the boat again and start feeding it through. All right, so everything is now routed the way that I want it. But what you would have seen is that there is a huge excess of cabling. And that's a really good thing if you ever move to a larger boat or you have a larger boat. Instead of having this mass of cable dangling at my feet, I'm gonna have the amount that I want sticking out the top here, and I'm gonna pull it back, and I'm gonna have a service loop at the transom here, like I did with the hook 4. So now all I'm doing is pulling back the excess so it's looped at the back. Now, your next part here is to mount your bracket to your transducer. You've got your bracket, which comes in 2 different pieces. So you have the flat section that mounts directly to the transducer, and then this is the component that fits directly to the transom. And then the 2 of them are connected with a nut and bolt, and that will allow you to swivel it to adjust the position of your transducer to get the best image quality that you can. So what we're doing here, guys, is just using the button head Phillips screws with a small spring washer, and they're just going through the 6 mounting threads in the transducer, obviously through our bracket. And that comes in the packet with the zip ties and a few other bits of hardware. Now, you're gonna likely need 2 10mm spanners for this. I'm assuming they're 10mm. I'll probably dub over if it's not. 10mm. Now, it's important that we don't do this too tight just yet. We need to tune the positioning of this to suit every boat. And we do that to both sides. And so that is essentially what you'd like it to look like. No, it's not. Look, that cable should probably be on the other side of this. I've screwed that up. I'm gonna have to undo this. Ah, crap. So that's actually what you want it to look like. You want the cable to be on the outside, because obviously you don't want it to be kinked on the bottom and then crushed between the transom and this mount. So the bracket is really clever. It's got that notch in the center there that cable will run through and come on the other side. Next, we just have to mount this up to the transom. In your kit, we were showing you earlier, but you get an inline fuse as well as the fuse as well, which is really nice. You don't have to go out and buy one. It all comes in the kit. So your fuse will be connected directly to your positive lead of your power cable. Oh, and they even come with some nifty little connectors for you. I have made the mistake before of placing the fuse in the fuse holder before even connecting everything, and that's a surefire way of blowing everything up. I would not do that. For those of you who are least familiar with electronics, your positive is most or almost always your red cable, and your ground is your black. So we're going to get the red cable of your power cable with your fuse. Now, this is bidirectional. I don't believe it's all that sensitive with which way it goes. Now, you place your 2 pieces or your 2 red cables together, and you push this little, I don't even know what you'd call it, connector over the top of your 2 cables. Now, not everyone will have something like this. This is a fairly basic crimping tool, and then you've got a more professional tool. I'm going to use this because it applies the correct torque to these type of connections, and I'm just going to crimp it together. And we're crimped up. Now, those 2 are connected, which is fantastic. I'm not entirely certain yet as to why they provided 2 of these. Maybe it's because they expect you to screw one up, or I'm not sure. But it's really nice that there is a second one there. Now, all we need to do is connect this positive cable and this ground to our switchboard or to our bus bar. And the way that I'm going to use that is with some of these connections. You'll get these from JCar or any electronics store. They're everywhere. I'm going to use the fork type connection because they are really easy to install into these switch panels. Again, you're going to want a crimping tool like this to crimp these, and just make sure that you get the correct torque. So that's what we're looking like. So what you could imagine is your power is coming from the battery, it's going through the fuse and protecting your equipment, comes through, goes into your sounder, and then everything comes out in the ground. Just make sure that this connection, there's no bare wires and neither of these are going to short out. Obviously you're going to have troubles if that's the case. Now, you know what I was saying about chronology of things? Think about it first, because how am I going to get this through that hole? And that's exactly why they give you a spare one of these. Oh God, how embarrassing. Learn from me, don't do what I do. All right, so we've learnt our lesson. Let's go and feed this through our hole first. I'm gonna go down and through. Now we're at the back here. Now we can do our stuff again. Oh, sometimes I am so smart. Now, what we're going to do is put this into our bus bar. Now this is going to be a really challenging thing to shoot. You guys should be familiar with your bus bar. We're basically putting the negative or the ground to the ground and this to the positive. If you've got a switch panel and you wanted to switch on your sounders, you might want to have a blade style fitting because that's what most switch panels use. And that'll go straight in the back, but this is still going into the bus bar. All right, let's do that. All right guys, this is really challenging to film, so bear with me. This side here that I'm pointing at is the negative side of the bus bar, and this is the positive. So anything that I want to hook up, I can hook to this positive electrode or this positive bar, and I can run it through. The reason why I'm connecting directly to the bus bar is because the sounders already have a switch to turn them on and off. If they didn't, or if you have heaps of electronics that you want to just turn off at the flick of a switch, you can just go straight into the switch panel, but I'm happy to go straight into this bus bar. So, just a quick recap. We've got our transducer, our sonar information, and we've got our power. Now, if you can remember, we haven't got the terminal switched on, or the bus bar or the switch panel connected to the battery, but we also don't have the blade fuse in the fuse holder. So what we're going to do first is connect the bus bar terminals to the battery. We're then going to put the blade fuse in, and then we're going to connect the sounder. We're just going to do a test to see if we're getting any power. Now is the moment of truth. We're going to just see if we're getting power to the unit, and whilst we're not in the water, we might be able to see as well if we're getting some information from the transducer. So let's grab our unit. Now, very easy communication or design communication here. The red power terminal goes into the red hole. There are 2 notches in here, and so it isn't possible to put this in incorrectly. So if you're struggling, just make sure that you have a swivel of it first. A good way of eyeballing it is the ribs on this molding here run parallel with the base of this the sounder. So just go straight in there, and now you're going to twist the collar of the terminal until it clicks. Very similar on the opposite side. We've got the sonar port. This doesn't have the ribs to line up, so you're gonna have to eyeball it a bit more. There is an oval molded in the this terminal, and we just line that up to the top of the sounder. So now we've got those 2 connected. I've got fingerprints all over this new sounder, and fingers crossed, we heard a beep, and there we go. That looks real pretty. So guys, that is basically the rundown of the rigging of the electronics. We don't have enough hours in the day today to tackle the front mount. Obviously the power system is exactly the same. I'm still not sure on how we mount or connect the 2 wirelessly. I'm sure that's going to be just as much of a breeze, but it's so exciting to see that Dora's moved from this tiny unit into this beautiful beast. And you know, how good does that look? What we've also got coming up in the next video, whilst we're going to connect the 2 sounders together, is we're going to talk about, or we're going to show you how to use the RAM mounts and setting that up, but also installing some Burley Pro visors. So thank you for stopping by and watching this video. It's always appreciated that you guys take the time to suss us out. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. It means a hell of a lot to us, and we're going to keep trying to churn out these videos for you. Dora thanks you as well. Good old Dora. She's coming to, she's finding her place, and we'll see you in the next one where Dora becomes even prettier. Thanks guys.